Tom Martinez had always dreamed of owning a lakefront cabin where he could escape the chaos of city life and indulge in his favorite pastime, fishing. After years of saving every penny from his job as a construction foreman, he finally found the perfect property nestled along the pristine shores of Pine Lake in the mountains of Colorado. The cabin was rustic but charming, with weathered cedar siding and a wraparound porch that offered breathtaking views of the crystal-clear water. Surrounded by towering pine trees, the property had been owned by an elderly man named Harold Winters, who had built the cabin himself in the early 1970s, when the area was still largely undeveloped. Harold had lived there for decades, fishing the lake daily and maintaining the property. With the care of someone who truly loved the land, and Harold passed away, his children, who lived in distant cities, had no interest in keeping the remote cabin, and were eager to sell. Tom had discovered the property through a real estate listing that described it as a private retreat with direct lake access and no restrictions. The asking price was within his budget, and after a single viewing he knew this was his dream home. The realtor Janet Collins assured him that the property was completely private, with full lake access rights that had been grandfathered in from the original land grants dating back to the early 1900s. During the inspection, Tom learned that the cabin sat on 15 acres of pristine woodland with over 800 feet of lakefront. The property included a private dock, a small boathouse, and a well-maintained trail system throughout the wooded areas. The lake itself was spring-fed and home to rainbow trout, brown trout, and bass, making it a fisherman's paradise. Harold had kept meticulous records of his catches over the years, documenting the health and abundance of the fish population. Tom completed the purchase in early spring, eager to begin his new life at the lake. He spent his first few weeks making minor repairs and improvements to the cabin, replacing some rotted deck boards, fixing a leaky roof, and updating the kitchen appliances. Every morning he would wake before dawn, grab his fishing gear, and head out to the dock to catch his breakfast while watching the sun rise over the water. The solitude was exactly what Tom had been seeking after decades of working in noisy construction sites, surrounded by the constant buzz of machinery and the demands of managing crews. Here at Pine Lake, the only sounds were the gentle lapping of water against the shore, the call of loons in the early morning, and the occasional splash of a fish jumping. Tom felt a peace he had never experienced in his adult life. 3 months Tom lived in blissful isolation, believing he was the only resident in the area. The nearest neighbor, according to his research, was over 2 miles away through dense forest. He established a daily routine of fishing at dawn, working on cabin improvements during the day, and spending evenings on the porch reading or simply enjoying the tranquil views. Tom had always been a skilled angler, having learned to fish as a child from his grandfather, who taught him to read water conditions, understand fish behavior, and tie his own flies. Pine Lake proved to be an exceptional fishery, with the trout being particularly abundant and healthy. Tom practiced catch and release for the most part, keeping only what he needed for meals and carefully documenting his catches in a journal, just as Harold had done. The lake was approximately 200 acres in size, with depths reaching over 100 feet in the center. The shoreline was varied with rocky points, shallow bays, and fallen timber that provided excellent habitat for fish. Tom explored every section of the lake, learning where the fish congregated during different times of day and seasons. He discovered that the north end, near a small creek inlet, was particularly productive for trout, while the southern shallows held good populations of bass. As summer progressed, Tom began to notice occasional boats on the lake, but thought little of it, assuming they were visitors from the public boat launch he had seen marked on maps several miles away. The boats were typically small fishing vessels with 1 or 2 occupants who seemed to respect the quiet nature of the lake and never approached his property directly. Tom had also begun to notice some new construction activity in the distance, across the lake where the forest seemed to be thinning. Through binoculars, he could see what appeared to be the early stages of residential development, with heavy machinery clearing trees and grading roads. While he was not thrilled about the prospect of neighbors, he reasoned that the development was far enough away to not significantly impact his privacy or the quality of his fishing. In late summer, Tom received his first indication that his peaceful existence might be changing when he found a survey marker planted near his property line. The bright orange flag attached to a metal stake was positioned just inside the tree line, where it would be visible from the lake. When Tom investigated, he discovered additional markers along what appeared to be his property boundary. Though he could not determine their purpose, curious about the markers, Tom drove to the county courthouse to review the public records for his property and the surrounding area. What he discovered was concerning. A large tract of land across the lake had recently been purchased by a development company called Mountain Vista Properties, which planned to build an upscale residential community called Pine Lake Estates. Development would include over 200 homes, golf course, clubhouse, and marina. More troubling was the discovery that Mountain Vista Properties had also purchased several smaller parcels around the lake, including some that bordered his property. The company appeared to be assembling a large holding that would give them control over most of the lakefront. With the notable exception of Tom's property, which remained privately owned with its historical lake access rights intact, Tom learned that the new development would be governed by a homeowners association that would have authority over common areas, including portions of the lake itself. The HOA documents filed with the county indicated that the association would have broad powers to regulate activities within the community and on the lake to maintain property values and ensure a high-quality living environment for residents. While Tom was concerned about the development, he felt confident that his property rights were secure given the clear title and historical lake access that had been documented for decades. His deed specifically mentioned riparian rights and lake access that predated any potential HOA authority. Tom decided to consult with a local attorney to better understand his position and ensure his rights would be protected. Attorney Michael Roberts reviewed Tom's property documents and confirmed that his lake access rights were indeed grandfathered and should not be subject to any new HOA restrictions. Roberts explained that riparian rights typically run with the land and cannot be easily extinguished by subsequent development of surrounding properties. However, he cautioned that HOA disputes could be complex and expensive even when property owners were in the right, Roberts advised Tom to document everything related to his property use and to keep detailed records of any interactions with the development company or future HOA. He also suggested that Tom consider reaching out to Mountain Vista Properties to introduce himself and establish a positive relationship before any conflicts arose. Tom followed this advice and sent a letter to the company explaining his situation and expressing his desire to be a good neighbor. The response from Mountain Vista Properties was polite but non-committal. The company acknowledged Tom's property rights but indicated that all lake-related activities would need to comply with future community standards as established by the Pine Lake Estates HOA. The letter suggested that Tom might want to consider selling his property to the company for inclusion in the development, which would provide him with a substantial profit and eliminate any potential conflicts. Tom had no interest in selling his dream property and replied that he intended to remain a permanent resident while respecting the rights of his new neighbors. He emphasized his commitment to responsible lake use and environmental stewardship, while making it clear that he would not surrender his grandfathered access rights. The company did not respond to his letter. Construction of Pine Lake Estates began in earnest during the fall, with crews working to build roads, install utilities, and prepare home sites. The noise of construction equipment carried across the lake, disrupting the peaceful environment Tom had come to love. Large trucks rumbled along newly built roads, kicking up dust that sometimes drifted across the water. Tom tried to remain optimistic, hoping that the construction phase would be temporary and that the finished community might actually enhance the area. The first residents began moving into Pine Lake Estates in early winter, starting with a handful of luxury homes positioned along the prime lakefront lots. Tom observed the new arrivals through binoculars, noting that many appeared to be wealthy retirees driving expensive cars and boats. The homes themselves were impressive structures, much larger than his modest cabin and featuring elaborate architectural details and professional landscaping. Tom made several attempts to introduce himself to his new neighbors by walking around the lake to visit the occupied homes. However, he found that most of the properties were gated or fenced with private security signs posted prominently. Few residents he encountered were polite, but distant, seeming surprised to learn that someone lived permanently on the lake outside their exclusive community. During these visits, Tom learned that Pine Lake Estates was being marketed as a luxury resort community with premium amenities and services. Residents paid substantial HOA fees in exchange for professional property management, private security, golf course access, and exclusive use of community facilities, including a planned marina and beach club. Many of the homeowners used their properties as vacation homes, visiting only during peak seasons as winter progressed. Tom continued his daily routine of fishing and property maintenance while watching the development grow across the lake. Construction noise had diminished somewhat, but the visual impact was significant, with dozens of large homes now visible through the bare winter trees. Bright lights from the homes reflected across the water at night, creating an artificial glow that had never existed before. Tom also began to notice changes in the lake itself as construction. Runoff and increased human activity affected the water quality and fish populations. The crystal-clear water showed signs of sedimentation near the development, and Tom observed fewer fish in areas where they had previously been abundant. He carefully documented these changes in his fishing journal, concerned about the long-term health of the lake ecosystem. In late winter, Tom received his first official communication from the Pine Lake Estates Homeowners Association. The certified letter informed him that the HOA had assumed management responsibilities for Pine Lake, and that all lake activities would now be subject to association rules and regulations. The letter included a copy of the HOA covenant's conditions and restrictions, which contained numerous provisions regarding lake use. According to the HOA documents, fishing was restricted to designated areas during specific times and required a permit from the association. Boats and other watercraft needed to be registered with the HOA and approved for use on the lake. Swimming was prohibited except in designated swimming areas near the beach club. All lake activities were subject to quiet hours and noise restrictions. To maintain the peaceful environment desired by residents, Tom was shocked by the sweeping nature of the restrictions, which seemed designed to exclude him from using his own lakefront property. The permit requirements, fees, and designated use areas would effectively prevent him from continuing his daily fishing routine that had been his primary reason for purchasing the property. Tom immediately contacted attorney Roberts to discuss his options. Roberts reviewed the HOA documents and confirmed Tom's suspicions that the restrictions were likely intended to force him to either comply with onerous requirements or sell his property to the development company. However, Roberts also noted that the HOA appeared to be claiming authority over the entire lake, which might exceed their legal powers. Given Tom's pre-existing riparian rights, the attorney explained that challenging HOA authority could be a lengthy and expensive process requiring careful documentation and expert testimony regarding property rights and water law. Roberts recommended that Tom first attempt to resolve the matter through direct communication with the HOA Board, while simultaneously gathering evidence to support his legal position if litigation became necessary. Tom drafted a detailed response to the HOA letter explaining his property rights and requesting an exemption from the lake use restrictions. Based on his grandfathered riparian rights, he provided copies of his deed survey and historical documentation showing decades of lake access by previous owners. Tom also offered to meet with the HOA Board to discuss a mutually acceptable arrangement that would protect his rights while addressing any legitimate community concerns. The HOA response was swift and uncompromising. Board President William Harper wrote that no exceptions would be made to community rules and that all property owners and residents must comply with association requirements regardless of when they acquired their properties. Harper stated that Tom's continued fishing without proper permits constituted a violation of HOA rules and could result in fines and legal action. Harper also claimed that Tom's fishing activities were disturbing residents and potentially damaging the lake environment through improper catch and release practices. The letter demanded that Tom immediately cease all fishing activities until he obtained proper permits and completed a lake safety course offered by the association. Failure to comply would result in escalating fines and possible legal action to protect community interests. Tom was stunned by the aggressive tone and false accusations in the HOA letter. His fishing practices were environmentally responsible, and he had never been approached by any residents expressing concerns about his activities. The claim that he was disturbing others seemed particularly absurd, given that most of the homes appeared to be vacant vacation properties used only occasionally. Despite his anger, Tom decided to follow attorney Roberts' advice and attempt good faith negotiations with the HOA. He requested a meeting with the board to discuss his situation and explore possible compromises that would allow him to continue fishing while addressing any legitimate community concerns. Tom offered to limit his fishing to certain areas or times if necessary, and to participate in any reasonable environmental monitoring programs. The HOA agreed to a meeting which was held at the Pine Lake Estates clubhouse in early spring. Tom arrived to find himself facing a board of 5 members, all of whom were clearly wealthy retirees, who seemed to view him as an unwelcome intruder in their exclusive community. Board President Harper dominated the discussion, making it clear that the HOA would not negotiate on their rules and regulations. Harper explained that Pine Lake Estates residents had paid premium prices for their homes based on promises of exclusive HOLs, lake access, and a controlled environment free from outside interference. Allowing Tom to continue unrestricted fishing would violate these promises and potentially expose the HOA to legal action from residents who felt their property values were being compromised. Board member Patricia Wells expressed concerns about liability issues if Tom were to have an accident while fishing, or if his activities somehow harmed other lake users. She argued that requiring permits and insurance would protect both Tom and the community from potential legal problems. Another board member, Frank Morrison, questioned whether Tom's small cabin was appropriate for the upscale character of the lake community. Tom attempted to explain his legal position and his willingness to work with the community to address any legitimate concerns. He emphasized his commitment to environmental protection and responsible lake use, while pointing out his property rights predated the HOA by decades. Tom offered to sign liability waivers and to follow any reasonable guidelines that did not effectively prohibit his traditional use of the lake. The board remained unmoved by Tom's arguments and proposals. Harper concluded the meeting by reiterating that Tom must comply with all HOA rules without exception or face escalating enforcement actions. The board offered Tom one final opportunity to purchase an annual lake use permit for $5,000, plus completion of their safety course and agreement to fish only in designated areas during approved times. Tom found the permit fee unreasonable and the restrictions unacceptable given his property rights. The designated fishing areas were small sections of the lake far from his cabin, and the approved times were limited to early morning hours when many residents might still be sleeping. The safety course appeared to be designed more for novice recreational users than for an experienced angler who had been fishing safely for decades. After the meeting, Tom consulted again with attorney Roberts, who advised that the HOA's position appeared to be legally questionable but would require litigation to resolve. Roberts estimated that challenging the HOA could cost tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees. With no guarantee of success given the complexities of property law and the resources available to the Homeowners Association, Tom decided to continue fishing while documenting everything in preparation for potential legal action. He installed security cameras around his property to record any attempts by the HOA or residents to interfere with his activities. Began keeping detailed logs of his fishing activities, including times, locations, methods used, and any interactions with other lake users. Within a week of the board meeting, Tom received his first formal violation notice from the HOA. The certified letter stated that he had been observed fishing without proper permits in violation of community rules. The notice imposed a fine of $500 and warned that continued violations would result in escalating penalties, up to $5,000 per incident, plus possible legal action for injunctive relief. Tom responded by a letter explaining his legal position and disputing the HOA's authority to regulate his use of his own lakefront property. He refused to pay the fine and continued his daily fishing routine while carefully documenting each outing. Tom also began researching other cases involving HOA's overreach and riparian rights disputes to better understand legal precedents that might support his position. The HOA responded with additional violation notices and increasing fines as Tom continued to fish from his own dock and shoreline. Within a month, the accumulated fines exceeded $10,000, and the association threatened to place a lien on Tom's property if payment was not received immediately. The letters also warned of possible criminal trespass charges if Tom continued to use the lake without authorization. Tom realized that the situation was escalating beyond his ability to handle alone and decided to retain attorney Roberts for formal legal representation. Roberts filed a lawsuit in county court challenging the HOA's authority to regulate Tom's use of his own property and seeking an injunction to prevent further harassment and fines. The lawsuit also demanded damages for the stress and expense caused by the HOA's improper actions. The legal filing attracted attention from local media, who found the story of a small property owner being bullied by a wealthy HOA to be newsworthy. Reporter Lisa Chang from the local newspaper interviewed Tom about his situation and wrote a detailed article explaining the dispute. The story generated significant public sympathy for Tom and criticism of the HOA's heavy-handed tactics. The media attention seemed to embolden the HOA, which issued a statement defending their actions as necessary to protect property values and maintain community standards. Board President Harper claimed that Tom was trying to use media pressure to avoid compliance with reasonable rules that applied equally to all lake users. The HOA also hired a prominent law firm specializing in community association matters to defend against Tom's lawsuit. As the legal battle intensified, Tom discovered additional information about his property that would prove crucial to his case. While researching historical records at the county courthouse, he found documents showing that his property had been part of the original homestead claim filed in 1898 by a settler named James Peterson. The homestead included specific water rights that had been legally established and maintained continuously for over a century. More importantly, Tom learned that the lake itself was not entirely within the boundaries of the Pine Lake Estate's development. A significant portion of the lake, including the area adjacent to his property, remained under the jurisdiction of the county as a public water body. This meant that the HOA could not legally claim exclusive control over the entire lake as they had been asserting. Attorney Roberts was excited by these discoveries, which significantly strengthened Tom's legal position. The historical water rights and the public nature of portions of the lake created multiple legal theories for challenging the HOA's authority. Roberts filed an amended lawsuit incorporating these new facts and requesting broader relief, including monetary damages for the improper fines and harassment. The HOA's legal team seemed unprepared for the strength of Tom's legal position and requested a delay to conduct additional research. During this delay, Tom continued fishing while the accumulated fines imposed by the HOA grew to over $25,000. The association also began sending representatives to photograph Tom, while he fished, apparently gathering evidence for their defense. Tom found the surveillance intimidating and invasive, but continued his normal routine while his attorney prepared for what appeared to be a lengthy legal battle. The stress of the situation was taking a toll on Tom, who had moved to the lake seeking peace and tranquility, only to find himself in the middle of a contentious legal dispute with wealthy neighbors who seemed determined to drive him away. The discovery phase of the lawsuit revealed additional problems with the HOA's position. Records showed that Mountain Vista properties had misrepresented the extent of their control over the lake when marketing lots to potential buyers. Many residents had purchased their properties believing they would have exclusive access to the entire lake, which was not legally accurate, given Tom's pre-existing rights and the public nature of portions of the water body. Attorney Roberts also discovered that the HOA had been charging residents fees for lake maintenance and management while claiming authority they did not legally possess. The association had collected hundreds of thousands of dollars from residents for services related to a lake over which they had only limited control. This created potential liability for the HOA board members, who might have unknowingly participated in misleading residents. As the legal case developed, Tom began to realize that his position was stronger than he had initially believed. Not only did he have clear historical rights to use the lake, but the HOA's claims of authority appeared to be legally questionable and potentially fraudulent. The association had built their entire governance structure around controlling a resource they did not actually own or control, the HOA attempted to settle the case out of court, offering to drop all fines and allow HOTs into someone else is arms. Structure around controlling a resource they allow HOTs, they alef. They aless. They aless. They aless. They aless. They alest. They alest. They alest. They alest. They alest. They alest. They are alest. They alest. Prolins Bincel last de alamenda instasenend. Tom to continue fishing in exchange for his agreement not to pursue monetary damages. However, Attorney Roberts advised that Tom's case was strong enough to justify pursuing full relief, including compensation, for the stress, legal fees, and harassment he had endured. Tom decided to reject the settlement offer and continue fighting for complete vindication of his rights. As spring turned to summer, the legal battle attracted increasing media attention, with reporters from regional newspapers and television stations covering the David versus Goliath story of a working man fighting a wealthy homeowners association. Public opinion strongly favored Tom, who was portrayed as a victim of HOA overreach and abuse of power. Several property rights organizations offered to support his case with expert testimony and legal resources. The increased publicity put pressure on the HOA board members, who began to face criticism from some residents who had not been fully informed about the legal risks associated with the association's claims of lake authority. Some homeowners expressed concerns about potential liability and questioned whether the board had properly investigated their legal authority before taking aggressive action against Tom. During the summer, Tom noticed that some Pine Lake estates residents had begun approaching him while he fished to express support for his position and apologize for the HOA's behavior. Several residents admitted they had been unaware of the extent of the association's claims and were troubled by the heavy-handed tactics being used against a long-time lake resident. One resident, Dr. Robert Kim, explained that he had purchased his lakefront home believing he was buying into a community that valued environmental protection and responsible lake stewardship. Dr. Kim was disturbed to learn that the HOA was actually harassing someone who appeared to be a model of responsible fishing practices and environmental awareness. Dr. Kim offered to testify on Tom's behalf if needed. Another resident, Margaret Foster, revealed that she had been misled by Mountain Vista Properties about the extent of the HOA's authority over the lake. Foster had been told that the association would have complete control over all lake activities, when in fact this was not legally accurate. She was considering legal action against the developer for misrepresentation and fraud in the sale of her property. These conversations gave Tom hope that not all of his new neighbors were opposed to his presence, that some residents might actually prefer a more collaborative approach to lake management. Tom began to envision a solution that would protect his rights while addressing legitimate community concerns through voluntary cooperation rather than legal coercion. In late summer, the HOA's legal position began to deteriorate as county officials confirmed that significant portions of Pine Lake remained under public jurisdiction and could not be controlled by a private homeowners association. The county also indicated that they had never approved any transfer of authority over the lake to the HOA, questioned the legal basis for the association's regulatory claims. State environmental officials also became involved after receiving complaints about the HOA's interference with traditional fishing activities and potential violations of public trust doctrines related to water resources. The state attorney general's office opened an investigation into whether the HOA had exceeded its legal authority and potentially violated consumer protection laws in their dealings with residents. Faced with mounting legal challenges and negative publicity, the HOA board finally agreed to serious settlement negotiations with Tom's attorney. The association offered to acknowledge Tom's rights to continue fishing without restrictions and to pay substantial monetary damages in exchange for dismissal of the lawsuit and agreement not to pursue further legal action. Attorney Roberts negotiated aggressively on Tom's behalf, ultimately securing a settlement that exceeded their most optimistic expectations. The HOA agreed to pay Tom $15,000 dollars in damages formally acknowledge his unrestricted lake access rights, and establish a fund for ongoing environmental monitoring of the lake. The settlement also required the HOA to correct their previous misrepresentations to residents about the extent of their authority over the lake. Most surprisingly, the settlement included a provision requiring the HOA to pay Tom a monthly fee of $2,000 for his consulting services related to lake management and environmental protection. Tom would serve as an unofficial lake steward, providing expertise about fish populations, water quality, and sustainable fishing practices to help the community maintain the health and beauty of Pine Lake. The consulting arrangement was particularly satisfying to Tom because it transformed him from an unwelcome outsider into a valued community resource. His decades of experience and intimate knowledge of the lake would now be recognized and compensated while allowing him to continue the lifestyle he had sought when purchasing his cabin. The monthly payments would also provide financial security and help offset the stress and expense of the legal battle. News of the settlement generated significant media coverage, with many outlets praising Tom for standing up to HOA bullying and protecting the rights of individual property owners. The story became a cautionary tale about the dangers of HOA overreach and the importance of understanding property rights. Before attempting to regulate long-standing uses of natural resources, the settlement also had broader implications for the Pine Lake Estates community, as residents learned the truth about the HOA's limited authority over the lake. Some homeowners filed complaints with state regulators about the misrepresentations they had received from the developer and the HOA. Others called for changes in the association's leadership and governance structure to prevent future legal problems. Board President William Harper resigned shortly after the settlement was announced, facing criticism from residents who felt he had exposed the community to unnecessary legal liability through his aggressive tactics. Several other board members also stepped down, leading to elections for new leadership that promised a more collaborative approach to community management. The new HOA Board reached out to Tom to discuss ways to work together for the benefit of all lake users. Board President Dr. Robert Kim, who had previously expressed support for Tom, proposed creating a lake management committee that would include both HOA representatives and Tom as the consulting expert. The committee would focus on environmental protection, water quality monitoring, and sustainable recreation policies. Tom embraced the collaborative approach and began working closely with interested residents to develop comprehensive lake management plans. His expertise proved invaluable in identifying potential environmental threats and developing strategies to maintain the health of the fish populations while accommodating increased human activity around the lake. The monthly consulting payments from the HOA allowed Tom to reduce his construction work and spend more time focused on lake stewardship activities. He established a detailed monitoring program tracking water quality, fish populations, and environmental conditions throughout the seasons. Tom also created educational materials for residents about responsible lake use and environmental protection. Tom began offering guided fishing tours for interested residents, teaching them about sustainable angling practices and sharing his knowledge of the lake's ecology. These tours proved popular, with both adults and children helping to build appreciation for the natural environment and understanding of the importance of conservation. The tours also generated additional income for Tom while fostering positive relationships with his neighbors. The transformation of Tom from unwelcome intruder to valued community expert was remarkable and satisfying. His daily fishing routine continued unchanged, but now served a broader purpose as part of his environmental monitoring responsibilities. Tom felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that his passion for fishing was contributing to the protection and preservation of Pine Lake for future generations. The legal victory also established important precedents for other property owners facing similar challenges from aggressive homeowners associations. Attorney Roberts received numerous inquiries from people dealing with HOA overreach and used Tom's case as a model for challenging improper claims of authority over natural resources and historical property rights. Tom began speaking at conferences and workshops about property rights in HOA governance sharing his experience and encouraging others to stand up for their legal rights when faced with unreasonable demands from community associations. His story inspired other property owners to research their rights and challenge HOA actions that exceeded legal authority. The Pine Lake community continued to evolve. As new residents moved in and learned about the true nature of the lake management arrangements, most newcomers appreciated having an expert lake steward and were interested in learning about environmental protection and sustainable recreation. The community developed a reputation for responsible environmental stewardship that attracted like-minded residents. Tom also used his settlement funds to make improvements to his cabin and property that enhanced both his quality of life and the ability to serve as lake steward, installed a small laboratory for water quality testing, upgraded stock for better access during monitoring activities, and created a workshop for maintaining equipment and preparing educational materials. The monthly consulting payments provided Tom with financial stability that allowed him to plan for the future with confidence. He established savings accounts for retirement and property maintenance while also setting aside funds for potential expansion of his lake stewardship activities. Tom considered the payments to be well-deserved compensation for the stress and harassment he had endured during the legal battle. As the first year under the settlement agreement concluded, Tom reflected on the remarkable transformation of his situation. What had begun as a nightmare scenario of legal harassment and threats had evolved into a dream arrangement where he was paid to do what he loved most while living in his ideal location. The monthly payments from the HOA continued, reliably providing him with steady income for his expertise. Tom had successfully defended his property rights while building positive relationships with most of his neighbors and establishing himself as a respected expert in lake management. His daily fishing routine continued as before, but now served multiple purposes, including environmental monitoring, community, education, and personal enjoyment. The settlement had transformed a contentious legal battle into a win-win arrangement that benefited everyone involved. The success of the collaborative approach at Pine Lake became a model for other communities facing similar challenges with balancing private property rights, community interests, and environmental protection. Tom frequently received visitors from other lake communities seeking advice about sustainable management practices and conflict resolution strategies. Looking toward the future, Tom felt optimistic about his role as lake steward and his relationships with the Pine Lake Estates community. The monthly payments from the HOA provided financial security, while his expertise was valued and respected by residents who had come to appreciate the importance of environmental protection and sustainable recreation practices. Tom continued to document his fishing activities and environmental observations, but now as part of his official consulting duties rather than as evidence for legal battles. His journals became valuable resources for tracking long-term trends in the lake ecosystem and identifying potential issues before they became serious problems. The transformation from harassment to partnership had exceeded his wildest expectations. The HOA payments had essentially made Tom financially independent while allowing him to continue living his dream lifestyle at Pine Lake. He no longer needed to worry about construction work or other income sources and could focus entirely on fishing, environmental stewardship, and community education. The monthly checks served as a constant reminder of his successful fight for property rights and the importance of standing up to bullying and overreach. As Tom cast his line into the calm waters of Pine Lake each morning, he smiled, knowing that he had not only protected his own rights, but had also helped establish important precedents for other property owners facing similar challenges. The lake that had nearly been taken away from him was now his permanent responsibility and source of income, ensuring that he would never again face the threat of being excluded from the waters he loved. The story of Tom Martinez and Pine Lake became a testament to the power of persistence, legal knowledge, and community cooperation in resolving conflicts over natural resources and property rights. What began as an attempt to drive away an unwelcome neighbor had transformed into a partnership that benefited everyone involved while protecting the environment and preserving traditional uses of a precious natural resource. Tom had achieved the impossible, turning his greatest adversary into most reliable source of income while maintaining his independence and lifestyle. The monthly payments from the Pine Lake Estates HOA continued to arrive like clockwork each month, serving as both compensation for his expertise and vindication of his decision to fight for his rights rather than surrender to intimidation and harassment. The peaceful mornings on Pine Lake now held even greater meaning for Tom as he pursued his passion for fishing while fulfilling his responsibilities as environmental steward and community educator. The settlement had provided him with the best of all possible worlds: financial security, meaningful work, beautiful surroundings,